America just issued a full naval blockade order targeting every Iranian port in existence. Iran had already launched its own blockade at that same choke point weeks before America moved. One waterway, two opposing blockades, and a fifth of the planet's entire oil supply at stake. Every choice made inside that strait this week will show up directly on your next fuel bill. This is the full picture of what is unfolding and why no American can afford to ignore it. The Strait of Hormuz is a ribbon of sea so narrow it fits inside the width of greater Los Angeles. Through that single ribbon flows 1 out of every 5 barrels of oil consumed anywhere on Earth. In the weeks before hostilities began, well over 100 laden tankers made that crossing daily. 6 weeks after Iran shut the lane, the daily count has collapsed to roughly 12 vessels. Global oil is 30% more expensive, and California drivers are already paying above $5. This week, that pressure crossed a threshold not reached anywhere on Earth since the Second World War. Sunday, April 13th, U.S. Central Command released an official notice to mariners carrying a firm deadline. This document carries legal weight. It is not a statement for the press or a post online. Every master of every vessel operating anywhere in the Persian Gulf received that notice directly. Its core line reads, CENTCOM will enforce a complete naval blockade against all Iranian ports. Every stretch of Iranian coastline falls under the order docks, loading platforms, and terminals alike. Karg Island is specifically in the crosshairs, the terminal handling 9 and 10 Iranian oil exports. Vessels moving in or out of those waters without American clearance face boarding, seizure, or diversion. Foreign ships already tied up inside Iranian harbors received a single departure window before enforcement. Once that Sunday window closed, the order stood with zero tolerance and zero exceptions granted. Here is the piece of this story that the major networks are consistently failing to explain properly. No American destroyer is currently sailing up into the Persian Gulf toward Iranian port facilities. The U.S. fleet is holding position in the Gulf of Oman and Arabian Sea east of the strait entirely. Picture a locked door. Iran holds the bolt from inside, backed by mines and drone patrols. Washington has positioned its forces on the opposite side of that door with a trap already set. Every tanker that takes on Iranian crude at Karg must eventually sail out through the strait. The moment that tanker clears the eastern mouth of the strait, the U.S. Navy is right there waiting. Traffic bound for Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, or the Emirates continues to move without being stopped. Any vessel believed to be carrying goods toward Iran, however, is subject to boarding and inspection. The American order is surgical, written down, legally constructed, and in force since Sunday afternoon. Iran's own blockade deserves equal attention. It predates the American version by several weeks. The IRGC formally declared the established international shipping corridor through the strait prohibited. That corridor had been the world's standard commercial route for an unbroken run of over 50 years. Tehran replaced it with new lanes cutting directly through sovereign Iranian territorial waters. They left an unspoken suggestion communicated clearly to insurers that the old route may hold mines. Stopping 100 ships a day requires no explosion, just the credible possibility of one. Ship owners and their underwriters do not need proof of mines, they need only reasonable doubt. Insurance coverage vanished from that route, ships stopped sailing, and Iran achieved its blockade without firing. Now consider what Iran's replacement route is actually charging every vessel that wants to use it. The toll Iran has put on the table runs as high as $2 million per ship per transit. Multiply $2 million by the 100-plus daily transits this strait handled before the war. The resulting figure sits near $100 billion annually, all of it flowing into IRGC coffers. The IRGC that funds Iran's ballistic missile stockpile and is enforcing the war zone declaration. Tehran is not merely blocking a lane, it is installing itself as the permanent gatekeeper of global oil. At this hour, Iran commands the western approach and America commands the eastern approach of the strait. Every tanker still anchored somewhere inside the Persian Gulf is pinned between those two opposing forces. Historians looking for a parallel have to reach back to naval warfare during the Second World War. That parallel is not rhetorical flourish, it is a direct reading of the naval history record. To understand how things broke down this fast, you have to start in Islamabad earlier this week. American and Iranian delegations had gathered in Pakistan for direct face-to-face negotiations. Washington and Tehran had not held direct bilateral talks of any kind since 1979. 4 decades of diplomatic silence between two governments, and it ended at a table in Pakistan. The U.S. side was led by Vice President Vance, with Witkoff and Kushner at the table alongside him. Iran dispatched its foreign minister and parliamentary speaker, the most senior officials available. Those delegations remained in the room and continued negotiating for 21 hours without a break. 21 hours! Both sides left that building with nothing agreed, nothing signed, and nothing resolved at all. Washington's non-negotiable demand was a binding Iranian commitment to halt nuclear weapons development. Iran refused. Tehran instead demanded full sanction removal, war reparations, and permanent control of the strait. Read that again. Iran asked to be paid for closing the strait, then keep running it indefinitely. The American delegation rose from their chairs, gathered their papers, and left the building. Hours later, Trump posted, and oil markets reacted within minutes of the post going public. The Navy was ordered to blockade all strait traffic and begin clearing Iranian mines from the water. Any vessel that had already paid Iran's passage toll was ordered intercepted and stopped at sea. The Post stated in capitals that any Iranian shooting at American forces would be destroyed completely. CENTCOM's formal notice followed tighter in wording, but carrying precisely the same message overall. Washington is now an active participant in the blockade, and every maritime operator knows it. Here is where the situation moves past a bilateral standoff into something significantly more volatile. Check any live vessel tracking platform today and find the ships on Iran's new controlled routes. Many of the vessels currently running inside Iranian waters are displaying Chinese national flags. 5 Chinese naval vessels are currently positioned in the region, and Beijing has issued no statement. No comment on the toll, no comment on the new routes, no comment on Iran's control of the strait. A government with 5 warships nearby saying absolutely nothing is itself a very clear statement. The question that Washington has no public answer for is actually a straightforward operational one. What is the U.S. Navy's move when it stops a Chinese tanker crewed entirely by Chinese nationals? A ship that departed Karg Island with a legal cargo of Iranian oil after paying the required toll. Does America board it and trigger a direct incident with the planet's second-ranked military force? That encounter is not hypothetical, it is scheduled, and the only open variable is the timing. There is one more factor that is receiving almost no coverage and could alter everything rapidly. 1,500 miles to the south, the Bab el-Mandeb is controlled by the Houthis. The Houthis are Tehran's most effective proxy and have strong incentive to join this fight now. Houthi activation would put every tanker loading at Yanbu on Saudi Arabia's Red Sea coast at risk. Yanbu exists specifically as Saudi Arabia's alternative export route, the one that skips Hormuz. Iran has already struck the pipeline delivering crude oil to the Yanbu loading terminal directly. A Houthi closure of Bab el-Mandeb would eliminate Saudi Arabia's last functioning export path entirely. Iraq loses its outlet. The UAE loses its outlet. The entire Gulf is sealed with no alternative. The energy disruption that follows would surpass anything the global economy has absorbed since 1973. The conditions for that outcome do not need to be constructed. They are already fully assembled. It is worth examining what blockade enforcement actually involves for the sailors carrying it out. The Venezuelan tanker seizures of 2 years ago offered a useful but misleading comparison point. Venezuela's ships carried civilian merchant crews with no weapons and no intent to resist boarding. A tanker departing Karg Island under current conditions presents an entirely different risk profile. IRGC fighters may be aboard, and the vessel itself may have been deliberately rigged as a trap. Shoulder-fired man-pads missiles hidden below deck can knock a boarding helicopter out of the sky. Stopping and boarding these ships is not a policing action, it is a combat operation at sea. Captured vessels would need to be delivered to Diego Garcia in the remote central Indian Ocean. That atoll base offers a lagoon with enough enclosed space to hold scores of impounded ships. Iranian ballistic missiles have struck Diego Garcia directly on 2 separate occasions this conflict. America's intended holding facility for seized Iranian ships has already been Iran's missile target. Every risk in this chain is understood by U.S. military planners, and the order stands regardless. The prevailing view among serious maritime analysts is that this is fundamentally a pressure campaign. The blockade, the USS Boxer crossing the Pacific, the 7th Fleet, repositioning all designed as leverage. It is costly and risky leverage, but leverage aimed at a negotiated exit, not a shooting war. The weakness of any leverage strategy is that it requires the other party to yield under pressure. Iran has shown no indication of yielding at any point since February 28th when this crisis opened. Here's the direct and immediate cost of these 2 blockades colliding measured at your wallets. The week this conflict started, Brent crude was sitting comfortably below $75 a barrel. It has been trading close to $97. That 30% jump is locked into prices now. You feel it at the fuel pump, at the checkout line, and on your monthly utility statement already. Petroleum is embedded in the cost of transportation, manufacturing, and distribution of everything you own. When supply at this scale is cut for this duration, downstream costs climb across the entire economy with a lag. That lag is the reason people are caught off guard when prices spike weeks after the headline fades. Maritime economists use a simple ratio: every single day of closure requires 1 full week of recovery. 6 weeks of closure at Hormuz means a minimum of 40 weeks before supply chains return to baseline. That is approaching 10 months of elevated costs, even under the most optimistic resolution scenario possible. The clearest real-world reference point is the ever-given grounding in the Suez Canal back in 2021. 6 days of Suez disruption translated into 6 to 12 weeks of cascading global shipping delays. Hormuz has been closed for 6 weeks, enforced by a government, by mines, and by armed aerial drones. The financial impact is not approaching, it has arrived and is moving through every supply chain quietly. Stack a dual blockade with no diplomatic resolution on top of that, and elevated costs extend into 2027. This is not a pessimistic projection, it is the straight-line outcome of the situation as it stands. Here's the specific intelligence that actually matters to track across the next 72 hours. Disregard the briefings, disregard the posts, disregard Iranian media saying American ships retreated. Pull marine traffic and verify whether U.S. naval assets are physically stopping vessels east of the strait. Track whether large commercial tankers begin rerouting toward the established lane inside Omani waters. Monitor whether the U.S. intercepts a Chinese-flagged tanker. That single event rewrites the entire dynamic. Watch Bab el-Mandeb. The first sign of Houthi movement there signals the conflict is spreading outward. Commercial tankers resuming normal transit is the one indicator that genuinely confirms conditions have shifted. No official statement, no signed agreement. Tankers moving through that corridor is the real measurement. Tankers flowing through Omani waters again means fuel prices trending downward across the next 6 months. 2 blockades holding diplomacy stalled. Houthis activating the consequences of that scenario are obvious. At this moment, 2 separate blockades are in simultaneous operation at the world's most critical energy node. Diplomacy ran for 21 hours in Islamabad, and Iran left the table asking for the strait permanently. Washington answered with a naval blockade notice distributed to every ship captain in the Gulf region. Right now in the Gulf of Oman, U.S. warships are holding position engines running, orders pending. Each tanker anchored motionless inside the Persian Gulf represents a shipment that never reaches its destination. Each additional day without movement extends the recovery timeline and keeps prices elevated that much longer. No side has yielded in that Gulf yet, and the coming 72 hours will tell us who moves first.